Welcome to The Adaptive Mind, where we talk with experts about practical, effective approaches to breaking habits and changing behavior. I'm your host, Brady. I'm glad you're listening. After the episode, be sure to head over to theadaptivemind.com, where you'll find the full show notes and transcript from our discussion, as well as an episode cheat sheet. Each cheat sheet has the most important points, quotable moments, and specific actions you can take to implement the strategies we discuss. Head to theadaptivemind.com to access a cheat sheet for every episode. Welcome to this episode of The Adaptive Mind. Today, I'm talking with Dr. Sarah Bowen. We're going to be talking about mindfulness in regards to breaking habits or overcoming addictions, and then specifically talking a lot about urge surfing, this concept of urge surfing. So, Sarah, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So to jump in, could you give just a little bit of introduction about yourself?
Sure. I'm a clinical psychologist. I've been working with this approach of mindfulness-based practices in the treatment of addictive behaviors, primarily substance use, but any addictive behaviors for about 20 years now. It's what I studied in grad school and what I've continued to do. I work both clinically and in research clinical trials with this approach.
Great. So starting with this concept of urge surfing, for someone that's never heard the phrase urge surfing, what image should come to mind?
Yeah, it's a metaphor, obviously. And the idea is that a wave is the urge. It has the same kind of nature where it starts and it tends to increase in intensity. And then if we let it just do its thing, it tends to fade in intensity. And the surfing is learning to stay with this and kind of ride that out rather than doing something impulsive to make the intensity stop.
Okay. And so the practice itself doesn't necessarily need to involve like a visualization of a wave. Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, if that's helpful to visualize it, great. If that gets in
hmm
the way and it becomes about making a movie in your head, then, let it go. It's more the idea of riding it out.
Yeah, yeah. So in some of your earlier work, you helped bring this concept into research laboratories and kind of make it a little more popular. What drew you into this study?
Yeah, I think what I really appreciate about this metaphor is the idea of working with discomfort rather than trying to just make it go away or running or being overwhelmed by it. We can learn to be with it, and that urges typically pass, sometimes very quickly. So if we can learn to stay with them and not react impulsively, that can give us some space and some freedom, really, to make a choice that may serve us better and will probably feel a lot better to us, even immediately.
Yeah, I've heard a couple of different figures, but I've heard like that an emotion only lasts 90 seconds or that an urge lasts, 10 to 15 minutes. Do you have any kind of thoughts on the length, or is that kind of just so variable that you
I
couldn't
think
even
it's so
say?
variable. And it probably, I mean, within a person and between people, it's probably variable. I think what's probably reliable is that they pass. It may be just a few seconds. It could be that quick. It may pass and then come right back again. But it can often feel like it's not going to go away. I have to make it go away. And that's actually not probably the nature of it.
Yeah, yeah. So, how did some of your earlier clinical work shape the creation of mindfulness-based relapse prevention?
Yeah. When I was starting grad school, my first year, I started also studying meditation in pretty intense retreat formats because that's part of the work that we were doing in the lab. I was also hanging out next door with the late Robert Kohlenberg, who was a behaviorist. And so that was very much influencing my thinking about just understanding how systematic behavior is and how we can shift and influence it. And then I was in Alan Marlat's lab studying addictive behaviors. So I was always trying to kind of shape this all towards treatment approaches. And then clinically, I was also learning CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and MI, motivational interviewing, which is a very collaborative, client based kind of approach, which I think also influenced the kind of the style of MBRP.
Yeah. And so would you say that urge surfing sits within MBRP, mindfulness-based relapse prevention, or is that kind of usable and maybe placeable within several different interventions?
Yeah, both. I mean, I think it really encompasses what MBRP is. I mean,
Hmm.
MBRP, there's a lot of different exercises and worksheets and practices. It's all kind of doing the same thing. It really is around the same thing. And I think urge surfing really encapsulates all of that. Uh, so it fits well within that approach, the MBRP approach, but it also, sure, I mean, it could be used anywhere that it's useful. I don't think it needs to necessarily be embedded in an 8-week MBRP course. It could be used elsewhere too.
Can you walk us through the wave metaphor kind of step by step? Like, what does the crest feel like and how do we ride it instead of diving under, so
The
to speak?
crest doesn't feel good. No, so the step by step is basically, when encountering something triggering that tends to elicit some kind of reactivity, whether that's substance use or anger or whatever it might be, the idea is this intensity of the urge, as we talked about a moment ago, tends to increase, and we learn to stay with it or kind of ride it out rather than fighting it. And how we do that really is bringing awareness to the body and how the body feels rather than getting caught in sort of the story in the mind or the idea that it's intolerable or I can't do it or I have to make it go away. Learning through practice to stay with that discomfort and really be curious about it. So we're kind of approaching it instead of avoiding it, and by noticing how it feels in the body, noticing what my mind is doing, noticing what about this feels so intolerable. And then also, what we often do when we're practicing this in session is after we've kind of ridden it and noticed the intensity and what's happening with that wave, asking ourselves, what do I really need? What is this that I'm like, there is an intensity here, and what is it really about? Um, so kind of learning both that we can be with discomfort and ride it out, and that we can maybe make a more skillful choice that's going to address what we're really needing rather than just make the discomfort stop.
Yeah. So what does that, can you be more specific about what does that really mean of what do we need? Like what are some resolutions
Yeah.
or some discoveries that someone might make as they're considering that?
I mean, it's interesting. Often, like when I guide people through this, I ask them to pose that question, "What do I really need?" and not look for an answer. So it's not about like, "Okay, I got to fix this. What I really need is this." It's just posing that question. And often, what I hear from people, sometimes things arise like, "Oh, I really need to feel heard," or "I really just need some relief," or um, "I really need a break," maybe. But oftentimes, also what I hear is that question alone shifts something. I think it's like shifting from fighting and this being a failure in a way of like, "Oh, I can't do this. I'm gonna fall." And then instead taking an approach of like, "Wait a minute, what how can I take care of myself here?" So I think it really is oftentimes more in the question and the attending to my needs rather than identifying what the need is and, fixing it.
Yeah, interesting. So I'm also curious, how do you lead someone through this in session? Like, are you intentionally triggering someone or having them visualize something or remember something?
Um, yeah, we ask people to think of something, bring something to mind that tends to be triggering or elicit some kind of reactivity. We suggest that people pick something doable, like scale of 1 to 10, like a 2, a 3. Let's start with a smaller wave and then we can practice and then work up to. Oftentimes, however, people, the thing comes to mind that they're struggling with and they end up working with it, or they pick something that they think is small, like they got triggered in traffic or something and it ends up being much larger. Um, but we do encourage people, something that you're comfortable working on here, and bring that to mind and play it out until the point where you would typically react in whatever way. And we're going to pause right there before the reaction and then walk them through. Imagine this is like a wave and notice what it's like and what do you feel in your body and what's your mind doing right now? And can you stay with this? Stay in contact with it so you're not avoiding it, but you're also not getting overwhelmed by it. You're not diving into it. You're contacting it and riding it and letting it do its thing, and you're safely on top of it and noticing what happens. And then maybe asking yourself, what is it that you really need right now? And then we kind of back them out of it too. It can be kind of intense for people. So
Yeah, yeah,
open
that
your
was my
eyes,
next
ground. Pardon me?
yeah, that was my next thought is I would imagine since you're with them in session, you're kind of also acting like a safety net. Um, yeah, it sounds like you have a thought about that.
I mean, it's kind of a balance between it needs to be this whole program needs to feel safe. It doesn't need to feel comfortable. So it's
Mhm.
kind of finding that balance of let's play with or let's experiment with being in contact with something that feels intolerable, and also making sure that people are not too far into it. Um, so a lot of invitation to, if it or sometimes you can just see in the room people are it's too much, and then it's not helpful when it's too much. So kind of backing down, you brought this to mind, you imagined it, you can open your eyes and let it go. And at the end, we take some time to kind of, open your eyes, move around a little bit, look around. You brought this to mind. You can let it kind of dissipate, and then we follow this oftentimes too with another practice called the mountain meditation that can be more kind of grounding.
Okay, very nice.
I do
So
want to
it's
say though on that,
yeah.
oftentimes when I'm training clinicians initially, they're a little bit like wary of this, and rightly so. They're like, "Whoa, you're," and also people in the room, the clients are like, "Well, what are you making me do?" Everyone, I've been doing this for years, and everyone's fine. I mean, I've had people be a little angry with me, which is
Mhm.
fine, and like, why are we doing this? And I ask them, what do you think? Um, but I haven't had an experience where it was like, oh, that we just did damage. That hasn't happened.
That's good. And so, is it true that while you're helping someone learn about urge surfing and practice it, do you like guide them through several sessions and then kind of let them go on their own? Or how are you encouraging them to practice on their own and let's say like build the skill on their own before they're really confronted with um, an opportunity to like use it in the wild, so to
Yeah.
speak?
Yeah. We do this in session 2. So, and the reason we do it so soon is to help people see how this weird practice of all the other things we do and closing our eyes and feeling our toes and all this stuff might be relevant in their life. So, it's like, okay, rubber meets the road. Here we are. Here's the thing you're struggling with. How might all the things that we did in session 1 and all the things we're going to do for the next several weeks be applicable, if at all, to you in your life and the places where you're struggling. I mean, I'd like to prepare people to go out and deal with this right away. I mean, they're already dealing with it. So it really is this is already happening in daily life. Discomfort is arising all the time, and we're reacting all the time. Um, so I don't really have control over that. I think it's, being systematic and supportive around learning skills that can help and that we can just start experimenting with in life. Like tonight, something's going to happen. Tomorrow, something may happen. And can you just experiment a little bit with some of this? And we offer worksheets and recordings and different ways of kind of practicing and integrating this, um, like very intentionally practicing integration of these practices into daily life, and especially these kind of sticky spots where we tend to be reactive or get ourselves into spaces that aren't so great.
Right. Great. So we've touched on it a little bit, but how would you say that urge surfing differs from like white knuckling or distracting yourself?
Yeah. I think it's really the difference between avoidance and acceptance in a way. Um, White knuckling is like, I can't do this, make it go away, make it stop, make it stop. Getting overwhelmed is like, I give up. um, it's like I can't do this versus this is more of an acceptance. This is really uncomfortable. I don't like it. Didn't ask for it, but here it is. How can I stay with it and work with it more skillfully? It's already here. So how do I want to work with it?
Okay. Nice. And
I think
so talk
also actually it's more sustainable. I mean,
mm,
fighting, avoiding is exhausting. It's, we're pushing, pushing, pushing against reality. Reality's here and we're trying to make it different. And that can be, that's why people like they fight, fight, and then they give in because that isn't sustainable. versus acceptance there's a lot more sustainability and resilience, I think, in that approach.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so you mentioned like with the crest of the wave and the wave being at the top right before it crashes. Do you have any thoughts on why urges and cravings get so intense right before they subside?
Yeah, it's kinda like there's something called, in behaviorism called an extinction burst, which is it's like when kids are in the checkout lane and they see candy and they want candy and mom says no or dad says no, and they escalate and escalate and escalate until they're screaming and having a temper tantrum, and then the parent gives in, you know? And so the kids learn like, "Okay, if I escalate enough, I'm gonna get what I want," and I think the urge is kinda like a child, who's learned from past experience, like, if I get loud enough and big enough, eventually I'm gonna get what I want, and this approach is saying, "Yeah, yes, that is human nature, that happens, and we have some choice. We can retrain that. We don't have to always follow that pattern."
Yeah, that's a very poignant analogy for me. I know when I'm able to um, deal with my children's tantrums in like a calm way, I can actually see this wave happening. Like sometimes all of a sudden it'll be done and they're like completely normal. And I'm like, what the heck just happened with you?
Yeah.
It's like kind of shocking to see it in another person. So it makes a lot of sense that we could kind of do the same thing with ourselves.
Yeah, and we see this in rats and people and children. I mean, this is where the kind of behaviorism comes in, is this is just part of being a sentient being, and, so we're definitely victims of it, but we can also, we do have some choice over it. We just have to learn how to retrain ourselves a bit.
Yeah. Um, so could you guide us through maybe like a 60-second micro practice that someone might try on their commute or someone could try out in the wild right now?
Um, yeah, I think the basics of really of the meditation tradition that a lot of this work comes from, and or it is right in urge surfing, is using the senses as a way of kind of unhooking from this craziness we get into in our heads and the reactivity, and a way to kind of step out of that loop is being in touch with our senses. And the first one oftentimes that we use is the body, because it's clearly not the head, you know? So if you're just kind of stuck in this reactivity or stories or worry or whatever it is, shifting to, okay, what's happening in my body right now? And, oftentimes we start with the feet because they're farthest away from the head. So that's a practice that, is really accessible anywhere, anytime, is what's happening in my body right now? I've been stuck in the story in my head, replaying a conversation, planning, just pausing and dropping down into the body like, oh yeah, my feet, I can feel the bottoms of my feet. I can hear sounds around me. I can see different colors and shadows. The senses, coming back to the senses, I think is I mean, that really is the essence of a lot of this practice. That's the skill that it really underlies a lot of this approach, because we get so stuck in our heads, and how do you get out of that? And one way is to come to the senses, to the body. So that's a good one on a train or in your car, or, whatever, is just like, what's happening in my hands right now? What's going
Yeah.
on with my body right now?
Yeah. It's so simple and so
Yeah.
effective and helpful.
And so
Um,
rare, like we don't do that naturally, most of us.
yeah, absolutely. Um, so how would you track progress, let's say, in your practice or really for anyone that's trying to break a habit of some kind? Is it, days sober, so to speak, or is it number of urges or lapses or whatever? How would you track progress?
It really depends. In research, we need to be very specific and systematic and get funding from NIH. So it's like, this is what we track because that's how you do this work. Um, so we'll absolutely, and because it matters, number of lapses, but also what happens after a lapse, or what's your relationship to having just lapsed? Is there like depression, anxiety, shame around that? And I would say in research, and also for myself and also for people out in the wild, as you say, there's sort of what happens, like count, how many times, how big, how small, whatever. And then also the other piece is, how are you relating to what happens? So if you do have a lapse, whatever that is for you, you do the thing you're trying not to do. What happens after that? How are you relating to that? What do you pick yourself back up again? Do you kind of go down in a spiral? That part is critical and I think often skipped. It's like just it's not over because that happened. Like something can come next, and that that's what I call it relapse prevention. There may be a lapse, and how can we help people not go into that whole cycle again of behaviors that is so hard to step out of. So I don't know if
Yeah.
that answered your question, but
Yeah, yeah, it does. It does. And so would you say that's more um like the key to that is how someone is talking to themselves and like how they're reflecting on these instances, or what would you kind of say are some of the keys to that?
I think the first key is awareness. Oftentimes you just get sucked into a hole and you don't know how you got there, and sometimes you don't even know you're in it. So initially, just awareness of, oh, what is happening in your mind right now? What's your mind doing? How are you feeling in relationship to that? Is your body reacting in some way? And then through that, really through the awareness, learning like, oh, wow, yeah, my mind, I'm saying this to myself over and over again. Okay. And through that awareness, like, oh, maybe I have some choice over that because now I see it. It's like you turning the lights on and going, oh, this is what's going on. Okay. What can I shift? Or what do I want to shift?
Yeah. So I know one way to kind of approach that situation is through affirmations. And I wonder at what point, like changing the narrative or your inner dialogue, at what point is that kind of helpful versus does it feel like disingenuous? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. It totally makes sense. I think affirmations can feel a little top down, a little forced.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, they feel that way for me. And I know that there's some research around that isn't too compelling. I think in this approach, it's more noticing the effect of noticing what you're doing and then noticing the effect of it. So maybe I don't even notice how I'm talking to myself. And then I notice, oh, okay, now I'm learning to kind of watch my thoughts. And I notice that I'm telling myself horrible things about myself and that I have a lot of shame around that. And that feels really heavy to me. That, that to me is very motivating. Like, oh, what if I notice that, what if I just shift that? Like I catch myself in the act of going, oh, you said you can't do this. You're stupid, whatever your narrative is. I catch that midstream and go, oh, I'm talking to myself. I'm telling myself these horrible things. Maybe I don't want to do that. Or maybe even just noticing it is like, oh, it's not truth. It's my thoughts. It's my mind telling me things. Maybe it's not true. Maybe it is. But it's not suddenly reality. It's like, oh, it's my mind doing what minds do when we
Yeah.
make a mistake. They're harsh on us, and maybe that's not actually reality. And then, there's some freedom in that space of like, oh, I don't have to do this anymore. What if I and we do some practices around um sending yourself kindness, sending others kindness, and just seeing how that feels, like noticing that that's an option of, oh, what if I wish myself well? What if I wish myself happiness? What does that feel like? What if I'm like on my own side versus constantly, beating myself up over what an awful person I am?
Yeah. Um, so for some people that might say like, "Oh, I've tried mindfulness and it didn't really work." What would you say is happening there?
I think I'd be curious what the person means by work. Like, what do you mean it didn't work? What did you believe, or what do you believe is supposed to happen? And also, what were you doing when you practiced mindfulness? What were you actually doing? Were you trying to clear your mind? Like, good luck. I don't know how to do that 20 years later.
Yeah.
Um, or did you not feel blissful and relaxed? You actually felt more anxious. So I think that there's just a lot of myths in that, um, of what mindfulness practice is and what it's supposed to do. And I think I would wanna know from this person, like, what did you notice when you were practicing? Or what do you even notice right now? Like, what's your mind doing? What's your body doing? What do you notice about your experience in this moment or in that practice? That's mindfulness, you just did it. I think there's so many myths out there, and there's pictures of people on magazines with, linen flowing and sunsets in the background, and it just doesn't it's just It doesn't look like that in my life at all.
Yeah.
And it isn't that, and I think that's an unfortunate, kind of myth that's being put out
Y-
there that people
yeah.
are buying into.
Do you think that's the well, most harmful myth, or do you think
Mm.
there are other misconceptions about mindfulness that are damaging?
Yeah. I think that's a pretty insidious one because it's excluding people from a practice that anyone can really do. It doesn't have to be 45 minutes sitting in the lotus position. It can be on the train, like how do my feet feel right now? What is my mind up to right now? Kind of just knowing what you're up to and knowing what your experience is it. And I think people can do that. And I think that the idea is that it's not something that I can do because I'm too messed up or my mind is too hectic or whatever is pretty harmful. So I'd say, yeah, that's a pretty harmful one.
Yeah. Yeah. By nature, it is very accessible. It's doable by
Yes,
really anybody.
yes, if you're curious about your experience or if you want to be curious about your experience, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Um, so a lot of your work is with substance use, and um, can the same like urge surfing and really mindfulness, can these same protocols help with like doom scrolling or with stress eating? And if so, is there any way that you would tweak them, or is it just kind of similar?
Yeah, we very intentionally called this approach mindfulness-based relapse prevention for addictive behaviors. And addictive behaviors is a pretty broad term. Um, I think um, the behavior is, I mean, it matters, but it's almost secondary to the process, and the process is really similar across different, whether it's doom scrolling or drinking. It's like, I don't like how reality is right now. I don't like how I feel. I want things to be different, or I'm bored and I don't want to be bored, or I'm anxious and I want to feel less anxious. So I'm going to grab the thing that makes me feel how I want to feel. But then it doesn't really work. It kind of works, but not really, or it has consequences. And that cycle you can see with binge eating, with anger, or aggression, with substance use, with gambling. It's a very similar sort of pattern and cycle. So the tweaks, no, I mean, I work with a lot of people who are working. I just had a meeting yesterday with someone who's working with binge eating, and we're talking about, what needs to change. It's like, well, not, I mean, maybe a word here and there, but the underlying processes and practices are really the same because
Right.
that cycle is the same.
Yeah. And that kind of makes me wonder, do you see clients who maybe let's say, use urge surfing for a specific behavior and then kind of learn to apply it to a variety of different ones? And they're like, oh, you know what? This could be applied to anger. This could be applied to X, Y, or Z.
Oh yeah, I mean, I do all the time. It's like, oh, I'm about to say something because I'm really angry. No, 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 no. Oh, I'm about to go to the refrigerator because I'm bored. It's just, I think it is very, yeah, and I hear that from people all the time. And, people come in for a specific behavior typically, and it just becomes apparent immediately, really, like, oh, I noticed I was arguing with my partner last night and I paused and I did something a little different. No, I came here because I drink too much, but I'm noticing in my life these other ways it becomes very, and we encourage people to do that. And it's, where are places in your life where you can just kind of be curious and see if some of these practices or approaches might be interesting to experiment with a little bit.
Hmm. Okay, great. Is there somewhere that people can access MBRP worksheets or guided audios or anything that we've talked about?
Yeah, I think the main repository for all of those things, we've tried to kind of put them all in one place. And there's a website called Mindful RP, as in relapse prevention, mindfulrp.com. It has resources for clinicians who are using this with clients. It has resources for clients. It has audio files. It has, things we published, the research, the clinician's guide, and it has some things that other folks have put together, which are better than many of the things that I put together, that like some of the ways to access practices and such. So that's kind of where they're all housed.
Okay, great. Yeah, we'll include links to that in the show notes and the description, so anyone is free to check those out. Um, well, great. I think I've learned a ton. This has been really interesting for me. Is there anything that we should go back to that you think we should cover more, or is there a question that you think would be helpful for you to
Ooh,
answer?
I'll probably think of it like tonight or tomorrow. um, no, I think I just want to emphasize one more time, like anyone who's curious about this, just the approachability of this. And it's not easy, but it's simple. It's not, it is accessible. And I've been doing this for decades, literally, and I'm still a mess and all over the place. And it's been the most interesting thing I've done, and I love it. I still, here's this conversation 20 years later, and I'm still excited to talk about it. So I really encourage folks, if they have any interest in this, if this sounds at all like something they might want to explore, that it's absolutely accessible.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. I hope everyone takes a little shot at this, or really digs into it. But thank you so much for our conversation. Thanks for
My
joining
pleasure.
today.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Adaptive Mind, brought to you by Nurture, the research-based app for overcoming unwanted or addictive behaviors. I hope you found our conversation insightful and inspiring. If you did, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners and continue bringing these learnings to people that need them. Remember that you have an adaptive mind that does incredible things every day, and it's capable of even more. We'll see you in the next episode.